October 3, 2023. The Border Patrol found the courier tied to a mesquite tree at dawn, still smoking from the gasoline fire that had burned him alive the night before. His name was Hector Vega. He worked for El Chapo's nephew, and in his jacket pocket was a letter that would change everything. Marcus Rivera had been feeding cattle when he heard the sirens. 20 years as a DEA agent taught him the sound meant trouble. But when he saw the smoke rising from the valley below his ranch, he knew this was different. The Vigilantes had finally crossed the line. For 3 months they'd been picking off cartel operatives along the Texas border. Clean kills, professional work, the kind that made federal agencies nervous and local sheriffs look the other way. But burning a man alive? That was personal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus guided his truck down the dirt road that led to the crime scene, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Deputy Sheriff Carmen Valdez had called 20 minutes ago with 4 words that made his blood run cold. "You need to see this." The valley below his ranch property buzzed with federal agents, Border Patrol, DEA, even FBI, judging by the black SUVs parked in a defensive perimeter around the mesquite tree. Marcus recognized the formation. They were expecting retaliation. He parked 50 yards out and walked toward the yellow tape, his boots crunching on the drought-hardened earth. The October heat was already brutal at 9 in the morning, but the smell hit him first. Burned flesh and gasoline. Even after a decade away from the DEA, some things never left you. "Marcus." Carmen ducked under the tape to meet him. Her face was pale beneath her tan, and she'd been smoking. He could smell it on her uniform. Carmen only smoked when bodies started dropping. "Thanks for coming. Your land borders this section. We need to know if you saw or heard anything last night." Marcus studied the scene beyond her shoulder. The mesquite tree stood like a monument to brutality, its bark blackened, the ground around it scorched in a perfect circle. Crime scene techs moved with practiced efficiency, photographing everything, collecting evidence that would likely lead nowhere, just like the other 3 murders. "I was in the house by 9, he said. "Didn't hear anything until your sirens this morning." It wasn't technically a lie. He had been in the house, but he'd also been awake until 3, walking the perimeter of his property with a loaded shotgun, because the Vigilantes were getting bolder, getting closer. "The victim had identification," Carmen continued, consulting her notepad. "Hector Vega, 32, from Nuevo Laredo, known associate of the Guzman organization." She paused. They found something else. A federal agent approached them, tall, sharp-suited, with a kind of aggressive confidence that screamed DEA. Marcus recognized the type because he'd been the type. "Mr. Rivera?" The agent extended his hand. "Special Agent Torres, I understand you used to work for the agency." 20 years, Marcus said, accepting the handshake. "Retired 2013. "Not retired, you resigned." Torres's smile didn't reach his eyes. "After the Juarez incident." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. Nobody talked about Juarez. Not ever. The official report had been classified, the agents involved reassigned or pensioned off. 3 good agents had died that night, and Marcus Rivera had been the only survivor to walk away with his reputation intact, because nobody knew the truth about his brother. "Ancient history," Marcus said. "What does this have to do with a dead courier?" Torres reached into his jacket and withdrew a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a piece of paper, singed around the edges but still readable. Marcus could see handwriting and address, what looked like a phone number. Vega was carrying this letter. It's addressed to someone named Eduardo Santos. Torres watched Marcus's face carefully. "Ring any bells?" The name hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Eduardo Santos was his brother's alias, the identity Antonio had been living under for 15 years. The identity that was supposed to be buried so deep that even Marcus didn't know where Antonio had ended up. But Marcus kept his face blank. "Never heard of him." "Interesting," Torres said, "because the letter mentions Juarez, October 15, 2008 specifically. It mentions 3 dead federal agents, and it mentions a DEA agent who might have compromised the operation." The world tilted. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning heat. Whoever wrote that letter knew about that night, knew about the choice Marcus had made when he saw his brother's face in the warehouse raid. The split-second decision to let Antonio slip out the back while Marcus called in false coordinates to buy him time. 3 agents died because of that delay. Good agents. Agents with families. "I don't know what you're implying," Marcus said. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Torres stepped closer. Someone is systematically killing people with connections to cartel operations. But this isn't random justice. This is targeted elimination, and now we have evidence suggesting these murders are connected to a 15-year-old federal operation. Carmen was watching the exchange with growing concern. She'd known Marcus for 5 years, since he'd bought the ranch and tried to disappear into the life of a simple cattleman. She'd never seen him look this shaken. "The vigilantes aren't just cleaning house," Torres continued. "They're tying up loose ends. Which means either you're a target, or you know something that makes you valuable to this investigation." Marcus stared at the evidence bag, at the letter that could destroy everything he'd built since Juarez. His brother's location, his own betrayal, the truth about why 3 federal agents had walked into a trap. The vigilantes weren't dispensing random justice. They were hunting everyone who knew about that night. And Marcus realized with cold certainty that he and his brother were next on their list. The Rivera Ranch sprawled across 800 acres of scrubland and dying grass, bordered by mesquite and the kind of stubborn silence that had drawn Marcus here after his resignation. He'd bought the property with his DEA pension and the inheritance from his father's construction business, thinking distance and cattle might wash the blood from his dreams. Some nights it almost worked. The white farmhouse sat at the end of a quarter-mile drive, surrounded by cottonwoods his ex-wife had planted before the divorce, before she'd learned what kind of man she'd married, what kind of choices he was capable of making. Marcus parked beside the porch and sat for a moment, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light streaming through his windshield. The silence pressed against him. No sirens, no crime scene chatter, just the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through dying leaves. This was what he'd traded his badge for: peace, anonymity, the chance to pretend he was someone else. His phone buzzed, a text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Thinking of you today, Dad. Hope the ranch is treating you well." Sophia Marcus stared at the message until the screen went dark. His daughter, 28 years old now, living her own life in Austin, working as a prosecutor for the Travis County DA's office. She'd inherited his sense of justice, but none of his willingness to compromise it. Sophia still believed in absolutes right and wrong, guilty and innocent, justice served clean and simple. She didn't know about Juarez, didn't know her uncle Antonio had been running drugs for the Beltran Leyva organization when Marcus found him in that warehouse, didn't know her father had betrayed his oath, his partner, his country for blood loyalty. Marcus typed back, "Ranch is good. Stay safe in the city." He hesitated, then added, "Love you." The response came immediately, "Love you too. Proud of everything you've built out there." He closed his eyes. Proud. If she only knew. The house felt too quiet when he stepped inside. Hardwood floors that echoed his footsteps, walls lined with books he'd never read, a kitchen built for a family he'd lost through his own choices. Marcus opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents: beer, leftover barbacoa, a half-empty carton of milk, but his appetite had died somewhere between the crime scene and Torres's questions. Instead, he walked to the living room and stood before the mantelpiece, where 3 photographs held court. Sophia's law school graduation, her smile bright and uncomplicated. His father, Miguel Rivera, in his work clothes beside a half-built house, pride radiating from his weathered face, and between them, a picture from Marcus's early DEA days, him and his partner Jake Morrison, both young and stupid enough to believe they could save the world one bust at a time. Jake had died in Juarez, along with agents Chen and Rodriguez, 3 good people with families who'd trusted Marcus to call in accurate coordinates, to lead them through the warehouse safely, to put the mission above everything else. But when Marcus had seen Antonio's face in that crowd of detained suspects, older, thinner, marked by years of choices their father would have wept over, everything else had disappeared. The mission, the oath, the brotherhood of the badge. In that moment, there had been only blood calling to blood. Marcus touched the frame holding Jake's picture. They'd been partners for 6 years. Jake had trusted him completely, followed his lead into that warehouse without question, believing Marcus when he radioed the all-clear for the back exit, the exit where Antonio had been waiting. The burner phone Marcus kept in his kitchen drawer hadn't rung in 3 years. Antonio knew better than to make contact unless the world was ending. But now, staring at that photograph, Marcus wondered if the world was ending. If the vigilantes had already found his brother. If that letter had been Antonio's final message, a warning delivered too late by a courier who died for carrying it. Outside, the sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky the color of dried blood. Marcus made himself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate without tasting anything. The quiet felt different now, charged with possibility. Every sound made him look up from his plate. Every shadow beyond the windows seemed to move with purpose. After dark, he walked the property line with his shotgun, as had become his ritual since the killing started. The vigilantes preferred night work, fire and gasoline, and the kind of justice that left no room for appeals or mercy. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Marcus wasn't just protecting his cattle from coyotes. Tonight, he was protecting everything he had left to lose. Marcus jolted awake to the shrill ring of the burner phone, the sound cutting through the darkness like a blade. For 3 years, that phone had been silent. For 3 years, he'd convinced himself it might never ring again. That Antonio had found peace somewhere far from the border, far from the choices that had destroyed them both. He stumbled to the kitchen, his bare feet cold against the hardwood, and pulled the phone from the drawer with trembling fingers. The caller ID showed only numbers, but he recognized the pattern. Antonio's emergency protocol, the one they'd established 15 years ago when trust was a luxury neither brother could afford. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Antonio's voice was raw with exhaustion and fear. They found me. Marcus gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles white in the moonlight streaming through the kitchen window. Where are you? Tucson. Was Tucson. I'm running now. The sound of a car engine hummed beneath Antonio's words. They hit my house 2 hours ago. I wasn't there, lucky break, visiting Maria's cousin, but when I got back, his voice cracked. They burned everything, Marcus, just like the others. The vigilantes. Marcus had known this call would come, had dreaded it since Torres showed him that letter. But knowing and experiencing were different animals entirely. His brother, his baby brother, who'd once followed him through the orange groves behind their father's house, who'd believed Marcus could fix anything, was running for his life because of choices they'd both made in a Juarez warehouse 15 years ago. The courier, Marcus said. Vega. He was carrying a letter with your alias. Eduardo Santos is blown. Has been for weeks, apparently. I should have run then, but I thought... Antonio's bitter laugh carried no humor. I thought maybe I could have a life. Maria and I, we were talking about marriage, about starting over for real this time. Marcus closed his eyes. Maria. In all their careful communications over the years, Antonio had never mentioned a woman, never mentioned hope for something beyond survival. Listen to me, Marcus said. You need to get off the highways. They're organized, professional. They'll be watching the main routes. Already thought of that. I'm taking back roads through New Mexico. But Marcus... Antonio's voice dropped to a whisper. The letter Vega was carrying. It wasn't just my address. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. What do you mean? I wrote it 3 weeks ago when I started hearing rumors about the killings, when I realized they weren't random. Antonio paused, and Marcus could hear the weight of confession in his brother's breathing. I was trying to warn you. The letter had your real name in it, your address, everything about that night in Juarez. The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's hand. His own name, his address, everything that connected him to that warehouse, to the choice that had killed 3 federal agents, to the brother he'd saved at the cost of his honor. You sent a courier with my information straight to the Guzman organization? Marcus's voice was barely controlled. I was desperate. The regular channels weren't safe anymore. These vigilantes, they're not just killing current operators. They're eliminating anyone who was connected to specific operations. Operations where federal agents died. I thought if I could warn you, if we could disappear together. Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. The magnitude of Antonio's mistake crashed over him like a wave. By trying to protect them both, his brother had painted a target on Marcus's back. The letter Torres had shown him wasn't just evidence of the vigilantes' methods, it was a death warrant with Marcus's name on it. How many people knew about the letter? Marcus asked. Just Vega, and he's dead. Antonio's voice turned desperate. Marcus, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I was scared and I thought, stop. Marcus cut him off. The damage was done. Recriminations would have to wait until they both survived the next 48 hours. How long until you reach the border? 6 hours if I push it. But I don't have papers for a crossing. Eduardo Santos is burned, remember? Marcus stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness that suddenly felt alive with threat. Somewhere out there, the Vigilantes were planning their next move. Somewhere out there, they were loading gasoline and rope and the tools of their brutal justice, and now they knew exactly where to find both Rivera brothers. "I'll meet you at the old crossing point," Marcus said. "Near Ojinaga, you remember?" "Papa's fishing spot, yeah, I remember." Their father had taken them there as children, before the cartels owned the river, before the border became a war zone. It seemed fitting that it might be where their story ended. "And Antonio?" Marcus gripped the phone until his knuckles ached. "Burn this phone after we hang up. Burn everything that ties you to Eduardo Santos. From now on, we're both ghosts." 6 hours to Ojinaga. That gave him maybe 4 hours to prepare before he had to leave the ranch, possibly forever. Marcus walked through his house like a man cataloging his own funeral, touching objects that had anchored him to this life. The coffee mug Sophia had given him last Christmas. The leather chair where he'd read 1,000 novels trying to fill the silence. The framed picture of his father, who died believing his sons were good men. His hands were steadier now, muscle memory from 20 years of federal service taking over. Marcus pulled a duffel bag from his closet and began packing with mechanical efficiency. Cash from the safe hidden behind his bookshelf, $43,000 he'd kept for emergencies that had never come. Clean clothes. His backup service weapon, a Glock 19 he'd bought after retirement. Ammunition. A false passport he'd hoped never to use. The passport bore the name David Castellanos, a gift from a forger he'd arrested in El Paso, a small favor exchanged for testimony that had put away 3 smuggling operations. Marcus had told himself it was insurance, a relic of paranoia from his federal days. Now it felt like prophecy. By the time he finished packing, dawn was creeping across the hills. Marcus made coffee out of habit, then poured it down the sink without drinking it. His stomach felt like acid. Every sound, the house settling, cattle moving in the distance, whined through the cottonwoods, made his shoulders tense. He was reaching for his truck keys when headlights swept across his living room windows. Marcus froze. No one visited the ranch this early. Carmen Torres from the sheriff's department, maybe, but she would have called first. The UPS driver didn't come until afternoon, which meant the light stopped at the end of his driveway, engine running, waiting. Marcus grabbed his shotgun from beside the front door and moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. A black SUV sat silhouetted against the dawn light, windows too dark to see through. Government plates, either federal agents or someone with access to federal resources. His phone rang. Not the burner, his regular cell, the number everyone in Laredo County knew. Marcus let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Mr. Rivera, this is Agent Torres. I'm in your driveway. We need to talk about your safety. There have been developments." Marcus looked at his packed bag, then at the SUV. Running now would be an admission of guilt, a confirmation of every suspicion Torres harbored. But staying meant answering questions he couldn't answer, protecting secrets that were already leaking like blood from a wound. A second set of headlights appeared on the county road, then a third, not agents' pickup trucks moving slowly, deliberately. Local vehicles that belonged to families Marcus recognized from town. The Hendersons, whose son David had joined the army after high school. The Morales family, who ran the feed store where Marcus bought grain for his cattle. But something was wrong with the way they moved. Too coordinated, too purposeful for a coincidence. Marcus's blood turned to ice water as understanding hit him. The Vigilantes weren't outsiders seeking justice against the cartels. They were locals, families who'd lost someone. Families who knew exactly who Marcus Rivera used to be and what he'd done in a warehouse in Juarez 15 years ago. Torres stepped out of the SUV, hands visible but close to his weapon. He walked halfway up the driveway and stopped, looking directly at the window where Marcus stood hidden. "Mr. Rivera, I know you're in there. I also know you're planning to run. Don't make this harder than it has to be." The pickup trucks had stopped on the road, engines idling. Marcus counted 5 vehicles, maybe 20 people, too many for a simple arrest. This felt like something else entirely, something that ended with gasoline and rope and justice that left no room for appeals. His phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus glanced down and felt his world tilt sideways. The message was from Sophia. "Dad, I'm sorry, but some secrets are too big to keep buried. Jake Morrison was my friend's father. Jake Morrison, his old partner, the agent who died in Juarez because Marcus had given Antonio time to escape. Jake, who'd had a daughter Marcus had never met, never thought to ask about in all his years of guilt and sleepless nights. A daughter who would be about Sophia's age now. A daughter who might have grown up knowing exactly who was responsible for her father's death." Marcus looked at his packed bag, then at the growing crowd outside his house. Running wasn't going to save him anymore. The Vigilantes had been planning this for longer than he'd realized, and they'd been closer than he'd ever imagined. They'd been family. He tried to remember Jake talking about family during their partnership. Late nights on stakeouts, endless hours in surveillance vans, 6 years of shared danger and dark humor. Jake had mentioned a daughter once, maybe twice. A little girl who drew him pictures of horses, who wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Marcus had never asked her name, never thought to build those personal connections that made partnerships into brotherhood. Another failure, another face he'd never bothered to learn, attached to a life he'd helped destroy. Torres was still waiting in the driveway, patient as death. The pickup trucks hadn't moved, but Marcus could see figures emerging from them now. Men and women in ranch clothes, carrying the quiet determination of people who'd made peace with necessary violence. They moved like they'd done this before, like they'd perfected their method on previous targets. His phone rang again. Marcus almost ignored it, then saw Sophia's name on the caller ID. His finger hovered over the screen for 3 rings before he answered. "Dad?" Her voice carried a tremor he'd never heard before. "Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay." "Define okay," Marcus said, watching Torres check his watch. "Your friends outside seem to have different ideas about that." "They're not." "Learned that someone she trusted got him killed. So she recruited you." The pieces were falling into place now, each revelation worse than the last. Found out Jake Morrison had a partner named Marcus Rivera. Found out that partner had a daughter in law enforcement. "She didn't recruit me, Dad. She showed me evidence and asked if I believed in justice." Sophia's voice hardened. "I said yes, because you taught me that." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. His own words, his own principles, turned into weapons against him. He'd raised Sophia to be incorruptible, to believe in absolute right and wrong. Now that righteousness was coming home to roost. The others, he said, the families outside, how many? Agent Chen had 2 brothers who became cops. Rodriguez left behind a wife who became a victims' rights advocate. They found each other through Jessica, formed a support group that became something else. Sophia paused. "Dad, they know about Antonio's warning letter. They know he tried to contact you." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "And you? What did you tell them about your corrupt father?" "I told them you were a good man who made a terrible choice. I told them you'd been living with the guilt for 15 years. I told them that justice doesn't always require gasoline." Through the window, Marcus saw Torres walking back toward his SUV. The agent's body language had changed, more urgent now, less patient. He pulled out his radio and spoke into it, too far away for Marcus to hear the words. "They're not all convinced," Sophia continued. "Some think you had your chance at redemption and wasted it, think you should burn like the others. And you? What do you think?" The silence stretched between them, filled with 15 years of bedtime stories and birthday parties and proud moments built on poisoned ground. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. The split-second decision that had cost 3 lives. But something was wrong with that memory. Something had always been wrong with it, and Marcus had buried the inconsistency so deep he'd almost convinced himself it never existed. He'd called the all-clear for the east exit. Sophia was right about that. His voice was on the recordings, telling Jake it was safe to move. But Marcus hadn't been watching the east exit when he made that call. He'd been staring at Antonio, zip-tied and bleeding in the corner, mouthing something Marcus couldn't hear over the tactical radio. "Help me." No, that wasn't right either. Antonio hadn't been asking for help. He'd been trying to say something else. Something Marcus had chosen not to understand because understanding would have meant making an impossible choice. The memory crystallized with awful clarity. Antonio hadn't said, "Help me." He'd said, "Jessica's here." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Jessica. Not a generic name, a specific warning. Because Antonio had known who was leading the raid support team. Had known that Jake Morrison's daughter was coordinating intelligence from the command post, had known that the Beltran Leyva organization had someone inside the operation. But that was impossible. Jessica Morrison would have been 12 years old in 2009. She couldn't have been. The realization hit him like a freight train. Jessica Morrison had been 12 years old during the Juarez raid. Which meant the Jessica that Antonio had warned him about was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been feeding information to the cartels. Someone who'd known exactly when and where the DEA would strike. Marcus's legs gave out. He sank into the kitchen chair, mind reeling. For 15 years he'd carried the guilt of saving his brother at the cost of his partner's lives. But if someone inside the operation had been compromising their position, his phone buzzed. Another text from Sophia. Dad, I need you to know something. Jessica's mother was DEA too, Internal Affairs. She investigated the Juarez operation, Internal Affairs. Marcus remembered now a cold, efficient woman named Carol Morrison who'd interviewed him 3 times after the raid, who'd signed off on the official report that blamed operational confusion and tactical errors for the agents' deaths, who'd asked very specific questions about radio protocols and exit procedures, who'd buried the investigation before anyone could dig too deep. Marcus fumbled for his phone and called Sophia back. She answered on the first ring. Dad, listen. Jessica Morrison's mother, he interrupted. Carol, she was the IA investigator. Yes, mom and daughter, they've been planning this for— No, Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Sophia, think, Carol Morrison investigated her own husband's death. What are the odds she found something that never made it into the official report? The silence stretched long enough for Marcus to hear his own heartbeat. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was small and uncertain. What are you saying? I'm saying your friend Jessica didn't recruit you to get justice for her father. She recruited you to finish covering up the truth about how he really died. Marcus stood, moving to his gun safe with new purpose. The vigilante killings, the systematic elimination of everyone connected to Juarez, it's not about revenge, it's about silencing witnesses. That's impossible. Jessica lost her father. Jessica's mother sold out her own husband to the cartels, Marcus said, pulling weapons from the safe. And when the investigation got too close to the truth, she made sure the right people died and the wrong report got filed. Now Jessica's cleaning up the loose ends. Through the window, Torres was walking back toward the house. But his posture had changed. He moved like a man following orders he didn't question, his hand resting on his service weapon. Behind him, the civilians from the pickup trucks were spreading out in a tactical formation that spoke of military training. Marcus felt the final piece fall into place. Sophia, how many federal agents are in Jessica's support group? Most of them. DEA, FBI, Border Patrol. She didn't recruit vigilantes, Marcus whispered. She recruited a cleaning crew. Sophia, where are you right now? His voice carried an urgency that made her catch her breath. I'm with Jessica. She stopped abruptly. Marcus could hear muffled voices in the background, someone giving sharp commands. Sophia, listen to me very carefully. You need to get away from them right now. Dad, what are you talking about? Jessica's been helping me understand. Jessica's been using you. Marcus grabbed ammunition from the safe, his movements sharp and efficient. Think about it. Why would she need you specifically? She has federal agents, access to databases, investigative resources. What could a county prosecutor add to that? Through the phone, he heard Jessica Morrison's voice, cultured and precise. Sophia, we should discuss strategy. Your father's going to try to manipulate you. The timing was too perfect. Marcus realized they could hear his side of the conversation, which meant Sophia was on speakerphone, which meant this call wasn't his daughter reaching out, it was Jessica's way of letting him know exactly how trapped he was. Hello, Mr. Rivera. Jessica's voice came through clearly now. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Marcus felt his jaw clench. Let my daughter go. This is between us. Actually, your daughter has been invaluable to our operation. Did you know she's been providing us with updates on your activities for weeks? Every conversation you two had, every change in your behavior, every sign that you were starting to remember details you'd buried. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Sophia's recent calls, her concern about his health, her questions about his time with the DEA. She hadn't been worried about him. She'd been monitoring him. I didn't know. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Jessica, you said you just wanted to understand what happened. I understand perfectly what happened, Jessica replied. My mother spent years investigating the Juarez operation. She discovered that certain cartel assets had been protected, that evidence had been buried, that the official report was a masterpiece of creative fiction. Marcus watched Torres reach the porch steps. The agent's weapon was drawn now, held low but ready. Through the kitchen window, Marcus could see more figures moving into position around the house. Professional spacing, overlapping fields of fire. This was an execution, not an arrest. Your mother was the one feeding information to the cartels, Marcus said, checking his shotgun. She knew about every operation because Internal Affairs had access to everything. The Beltran Leyva organization stayed ahead of us because they had someone inside IA. My mother was a patriot. Jessica's voice turned cold. She discovered that agents like you were compromising operations to protect criminal family members. She did what was necessary to preserve the integrity of federal law enforcement. Marcus laughed bitterly. She got her own husband killed to protect her cover, and when the investigation got too close, she buried it under paperwork and bureaucracy. The investigation revealed exactly what it needed to reveal. That corruption within the DEA led to operational failures and agent deaths. My father died because someone you prioritized personal loyalty over professional duty. The front door rattled under Torres's fist. Mr. Rivera, this is your final opportunity to surrender peacefully. Marcus moved to the back of the house, staying low. The kitchen door was already covered. He could see movement through the gap in the curtains, every exit blocked. Just like Juarez, except this time he was the target. Sophia, he said into the phone, I need you to understand something. I did save Antonio that night, but I didn't compromise the operation. Your friend's mother did that months before we ever set foot in that warehouse. You're lying, Jessica said. We have recordings. You have recordings of me calling an all clear that your mother's intelligence said was safe. Recordings of me following operational protocols that were designed to fail. Marcus reached the bedroom window, peering out at the cordon of vehicles. The question is, why kill everyone now? Why not just let the official report stand? Because Antonio survived, Sophia's voice was thick with understanding, and he had proof. Marcus nodded even though she couldn't see him. 15 years of silence, and then Antonio decides to reach out. What changed? What made him finally break cover? Through the phone, he heard Jessica Morrison draw a sharp breath, and in that moment, Marcus understood the final piece of the puzzle. Your mother's dead, isn't she? He said quietly. And dying, she confessed. Told you the truth about what she'd done. The silence that followed was answer enough. Marcus pressed his back against the bedroom wall, processing the weight of that confession. She told you that she'd been feeding intelligence to the cartels, that she'd set up her own husband to die. She told me that she'd made impossible choices to protect a larger operation. Jessica's voice cracked. That sometimes good people have to die to prevent worse outcomes, that my father's death saved dozens of other agents by preserving her cover. Through the window, Marcus watched Torres signal to his team. The noose was tightening, but something in Jessica's tone had shifted. The cold control was fracturing, revealing the grief beneath. And you believe that? Marcus asked gently. I had to believe it. The words came out broken. Because the alternative was accepting that my mother was a monster who sacrificed her own husband for money. Sophia's voice cut through, sharp with realization. Money? Jessica, what money? Marcus heard the intake of breath, the moment when Jessica realized she'd revealed too much. But the dam had broken now, 15 years of buried truth spilling out. The Beltran Leyva organization paid her $2 million over 3 years, Jessica whispered. She used it to pay for my father's cancer treatments, then his funeral expenses, then my college education. Every scholarship I earned, every opportunity I had, it was all paid for with cartel blood money. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, the grinding weight of 15 years of guilt suddenly redistributed. He'd carried the responsibility for Jake Morrison's death, but Jake Morrison had been marked for execution long before they'd set foot in that Juarez warehouse. She made me promise, Jessica continued, her voice barely audible, made me swear that I'd protect her legacy, that I'd make sure the truth stayed buried. By murdering everyone who might expose it, Marcus said, by ensuring that justice was served. The steel returned to Jessica's voice. My mother may have been compromised, but you still chose to save a cartel operative instead of your partners. Antonio Rivera is still alive because you prioritized blood over badge. Marcus heard Torres at the front door, the quiet scrape of lockpicks. Professional entry, not the dramatic breach of television raids. They wanted him alive long enough to extract information about Antonio's location. Sophia, he said urgently, you need to understand what's really happening here. Jessica isn't seeking justice, she's completing her mother's cover-up. Every person they've killed had evidence that could expose the real truth about Juarez. That's not, Sophia started. The courier who burned, Marcus interrupted. He wasn't just carrying Antonio's letter to me. He was carrying documentation about payments made to federal agents, financial records that would lead back to Carol Morrison. Through the phone, he heard Jessica's sharp intake of breath. The other victims, Marcus continued. They weren't just witnesses to my mistake. They were people who'd started asking questions about why the Juarez investigation was buried so quickly, about why certain evidence never made it into the official report. The lock clicked. Torres was inside now, moving through the house with practiced silence. Marcus gripped his shotgun, but he knew this wasn't about winning a firefight. This was about truth. "Jessica," he said, his voice carrying across 15 years of pain, "your father was a good man. He died because someone he trusted betrayed him. But killing more good people won't bring him back, and it won't wash the blood money clean. Don't you dare." Jessica's composure shattered completely. "Don't you dare lecture me about my father when you're the reason he's dead." "I'm the reason Antonio's alive," Marcus corrected. "Your mother is the reason your father's dead. And if you continue down this path, you'll be no different from her." The accusation hit its mark. Marcus heard Jessica's ragged breathing, the sound of someone confronting a truth they'd spent years avoiding. "Sophia," Marcus said quietly, "what's it going to be, justice or vengeance?" Footsteps in the hallway now. Torres was close, maybe 30 seconds away. But Marcus found himself strangely calm, the crushing weight of guilt finally lifting from his shoulders. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally in the light. "Dad," Sophia's voice was thick with tears, "I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You were," Marcus said. "You just had the wrong facts." Torres appeared in the doorway, weapon raised. Behind him, Marcus could see other figures moving through the house, but the agent's eyes were uncertain now, as if he'd heard enough of the conversation to question his orders. "It's over, Rivera," Torres said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus set down his shotgun and raised his hands. "Yes," he said quietly, "it finally is. Agent Torres, you have your orders. Secure Rivera for transport." But Torres didn't move, his eyes fixed on Marcus with something that looked almost like recognition. "Sir, I need to ask, was that conversation recorded?" "Everything's been recorded." Jessica's voice was steadier now, rebuilding control. "Standard operational protocol." Marcus watched Torres's expression shift as the implications settled. A federal agent following orders to execute civilians based on evidence that had just been revealed as fabricated. Orders issued by someone whose mother had been a cartel asset. The careful legal framework that had justified their actions was crumbling in real time. "Sophia," Marcus said quietly into the phone. "Where are you?" Sophia's voice was uncertain. "We're in a warehouse. Outside Laredo. Dad, there are bodies here. People who—" The line went dead. Torres lowered his weapon completely. "Sir, I think we have a problem." Through the bedroom window, Marcus could see the other agents pulling back from their positions. Radio chatter echoed through the house as Torres received new instructions, his responses growing increasingly tense. "Command, I need clarification on operational authority," Torres said into his radio. "We have conflicting intelligence regarding target status." Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, feeling suddenly older than his 58 years. How many people have died for this cover-up? 7 confirmed, Torres said quietly. "Maybe more. Morrison's been running classified operations for months, telling us we were tracking a terrorist cell with cartel connections." "You were tracking witnesses," Marcus said. "People who could connect Carol Morrison to the Beltran-Leyva organization." Torres nodded slowly. "The Courier wasn't just carrying a letter. We recovered financial documents, bank routing numbers, payment schedules dating back 15 years. Morrison ordered everything destroyed before analysis. But you kept copies. Standard evidence protocol." Torres holstered his weapon. "Sir, I think my team just became targets too." The house fell silent except for the distant sound of vehicles starting outside. Through the window, Marcus watched half the tactical team driving away, leaving Torres and 2 other agents stranded. Marcus's phone rang. "Sophia." "Dad?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Jessica's gone. She left us here, and Dad, I think she's coming for you." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Are you safe? Can you get out?" Agent Morrison sealed the exits. "But Dad, I found something, files that belong to her mother, transaction records, communication logs, everything that proves what really happened in Juarez." Torres stepped closer, his radio crackling with urgent chatter. "Rivera, we need to move. Morrison's declared this a rogue operation and requested immediate federal response. She's telling everyone we've gone dark." Marcus stood, retrieving his shotgun, but instead of the familiar weight of desperate determination, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years, clarity. The truth was finally complete, all the buried pieces assembled into a picture that made terrible sense. "No," he said quietly. "We're not running anymore." His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, it's Antonio. Sophia gave me your contact. I'm sorry it took 15 years to find the courage to reach out. I have something that belongs to you." The message included an address in Nuevo Laredo, just across the border, a place where the jurisdiction games and federal cover-ups couldn't follow. Marcus showed the message to Torres, who read it twice before nodding slowly. Original evidence from the Juarez operation? Probably. Marcus felt something settle in his chest. A piece he'd forgotten was possible. "Agent Torres, you have a choice to make. You can follow Jessica Morrison's orders and complete her mother's cover-up, or you can help me finish what should have ended 15 years ago." Torres looked at his remaining men, then back at Marcus. "Sir, I became a federal agent to serve justice, not to execute it." They drove toward the border in convoy, Torres and his agents providing escort while Marcus followed in his pickup. The afternoon sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, the same colors Marcus remembered from his early days with the DEA when justice seemed like something achievable rather than something to be buried under paperwork. At the border crossing, Torres stopped. "This is as far as federal jurisdiction extends." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." "Rivera?" Torres called as Marcus reached his truck. "For what it's worth, you made the right choice that night. Family should matter more than badge." Marcus crossed into Mexico alone, driving toward answers that had waited 15 years to be claimed. Behind him, the Texas landscape stretched toward a horizon he might never see again. But for the first time since Juarez, he was moving toward truth instead of running from it. The guilt that had defined him was gone, replaced by something harder but cleaner: acceptance of the price that truth demands and the courage to pay it.